Syria's president says his country has no intention of carrying out military intervention in Lebanon. al-Sharaa made the comments in an exclusive and wide-ranging interview with Al Jazeera, focusing on regional security and Syria's domestic challenges. He also addressed the US decision to remove Syria from its list of state sponsors of terrorism.
You met with President Trump after the NATO summit in Turkey, and the law classifying Syria as a state sponsor of terrorism was cancelled after nearly half a century.
Syria's classification as a state sponsor of terrorism dates back to the year 79, so it's a very old classification, and without lifting this classification, we won't gain much benefit from also lifting the ban under the Caesar Act. Therefore, Syria must be cleared of all the laws shackling it, and this is the path that President Trump has taken, and we thank him for it.
al-Sharaa also addressed the situation in Lebanon.
The Lebanese state has pledged to disarm Hezbollah in a way that has led people to ask, can it really disarm Hezbollah?
We are not considering military interventions. Whatever is being discussed, the Syrian state is trying to enable the Lebanese state to fulfill the commitments it has made. Syria must ensure that no major disruption occurs in Lebanon, one that would reflect as a negative reality spilling over into the Syrian reality. At the same time, we help the Lebanese state empower its executive authorities, strengthen the rule of law, and implement the Taif Agreement, which all parties signed and which is considered a document serving as a reference constitution for the Lebanese state.
Obaida Hitto is live for us in Damascus. Obaida, now Syria must be very concerned about the situation in Lebanon, particularly, of course, southern Lebanon.
That's very true. The shared interests between Lebanon and Syria, especially on the security side, are very intimate. Syria has been actively trying to stop shipments of weapons by Iran and Iranian proxies through Syria to Hezbollah in Lebanon. These include groups that are tied to militias in Iraq, as well as remnants of the former regime here in Syria that are continuing to provide that kind of support to Hezbollah. Syria has been engaged with the Lebanese government in trying to stop these kinds of illegal cross-border operations. They're also very concerned about the number of Syrians that is here in Damascus. There are over 500,000 Syrian refugees still living in Lebanon. This is also putting a lot of pressure on the Lebanese government. This is something that has been very important over the last 6 months or so, especially as the violence in Lebanon increased and Hezbollah and Israel were engaged in armed conflict. The numbers of returnees from Lebanon increased significantly, which has also put a lot of pressure on Damascus here to respond to their needs, find places for people to live as they return to a state that's still trying to recover from more than a decade of conflict. But today, the Syrian president is setting the record straight. This is coming after multiple public events where the U.S. president put the Syrian president on the spot to say so, basically at the G7 and then at the NATO summit in July earlier this month. And then again in a Fox News interview just a few days ago, the U.S. president has been saying that Syria is going to take care of Hezbollah. But today the Syrian president is saying no, they have bilateral relations with Lebanon and they respect Lebanon's national sovereignty, and they're wanting to establish equal state-to-state relations with Beirut.
Obaida, if Syria has concerns about Lebanon, they certainly have them about Israel, given what's happening with the Golan Heights and also, of course, the UN Secretary General's visit yesterday.
Yeah, it seems like this issue of the Golan Heights and Syrian territorial sovereignty really took the center stage during the UN Secretary General's visit. He had very strong statements saying outright that the Golan Heights were Syrian territory. But what we've seen since the Assad regime fell is Israel carrying out over 1,000 airstrikes and over 400 on-the-ground military incursions into Syrian territory. That is inside the buffer zone between the Alpha and Bravo line that separates the Golan Heights from part of Quneitra province. And they've also expanded beyond the Bravo line, which is the Syrian side of that buffer zone. And they've expanded significantly. A total of 1,800 square kilometers of Syrian territory are now either directly occupied or affected by Israeli military operations in the south of the country. And that's extremely concerning for Damascus, but the Syrian president is saying they want to go back to the established 1974 disengagement line and go back to the negotiating table. And he said that if this was what would happen, essentially that this is opening a door for more peaceful relations and would be the start of a discussion that could carry on for peace and stability in the region. And he was very clear that Syria did not want to have any kind of aggressive action against Israel. They're taking a non-aggressive stance and they're open to discussion, but they need to go back. That is, Israel needs to withdraw to the 1974 lines. And this is something that was reflected in the UN Secretary General's statements during his visit here in Damascus as well.
What are President al-Sharaa views on the question of the relationship with Israel?
If the security agreement succeeds and Israel commits to the security side and Syria does as well, along with all the conditions of the agreement that may be concluded later, this would qualify the situation for a second stage of talks about a comprehensive peace without conceding Syria's right to the occupied Golan Heights.
Yeah, and I think the president is clear there that he's open to further discussions, because this is not an issue that just started when Ahmed al-Sharaa came into office here in Syria as this transitional leader of this country that's just rebuilding itself after more than a decade of conflict. What he's trying to deal with is this expansionist policy that Israel continues to demonstrate in southern Syria. They've crossed into the UN-declared buffer zone and over the Syrian Bravo line, expanding into huge amounts of territory, displacing people, kidnapping people. Just this year, since January, there have been over 35 incidents of Israeli strikes, incursions, arrests, kidnappings, disappearances, harassment to people in these places in southern Syria, especially in Quneitra as well as Daraa province. And that's causing a lot of concern here in Syria, and which puts pressure on the government in Damascus to take a very strong position on this and find a solution, possibly opening the door to further peace here in Syria with Israel, its neighbor.
Obaida, thank you. Obaida Hitto there, joining us live from Damascus.